Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar series. Today's webinar being on the subject of tranquility. My name is Helen Howe. I'm the membership and volunteer lead at Friends of the Lake District. So just want to welcome you to our webinars. As you might know, this is part of our regular webinar series now. So we're holding one on the fourth Wednesday of every month. And they'll be advertised on our website as we go through. So I hope you enjoy today's session. The way it works in our webinar is we can't see or hear you, so obviously don't try and unmute and speak to us, but you should be able to chat with us both through the chat function at the bottom of the webinar screen and also through the Q&A section. So there'll be opportunities as we go through to either say put some comments in the chat bar or also add to your questions. I'm joined today by Lorraine Wall. She's our Head of Planning and Policy. So I'd like to introduce Lorraine, and Lorraine will be talking to us today on the subject of tranquility. Over to you, Lorraine.
Thank you. Yeah, are you dealing with the slides, Helen? Thank you. So really good to speak to you today about tranquility, which is a really important topic for us. Slide, Helen. Sorry, could we have the next slide? Yeah. So it's a really important topic for us, and our members and supporters have expressed that in recent member and supporter surveys that we've had lots of responses to. So it's not new for us though. It's something that we've looked at through previous projects as well, and that we try to draw out as an important factor in our day-to-day work as well. Whether that's responding to planning applications or our other projects and engagement work. Although it's an important topic, we do feel it's a very much misunderstood topic and often overlooked. And that's partly because it is a very complex topic and hard to pin down as to exactly what tranquility is in any particular time or space or an individual's understanding. But we are concerned that it gets overlooked and not really given enough consideration, partly because of that misunderstanding, perhaps, in decision making and in the management, particularly of the Lake District National Park. And sometimes because of changing trends in the park, but also because of that misunderstanding and overlooking, we feel there are threats to tranquility. And it's been eroded, some places more than others, but being eroded in a general sense across the park. And because of that, we do really want to do more than we currently do in relation to understanding and raising awareness about tranquility and helping to protect it. So before we go on, I'd just like to ask you maybe to pop in the chat or maybe make a note of what tranquility means to you in terms of your current understanding. What would you answer? How would you answer the question of what is tranquility? Just give you a couple of moments to do that. And if you can give me the next slide, Helen, please. So in terms of dictionary definitions, these are sort of drawn from three different definitions we've discovered through our research about tranquility. It's a quality or state of being tranquil and calm, a calmness, peacefulness, quietness, be about a feeling of serenity, and a state of being, a state of peace and quiet. So they're all pivoting around noise, a noise factor, but it also spills into feelings and how people feel and senses. And that's really important because a lot of the time we do see tranquility being brought down to just being a simplistic thing about noise. But of course, tranquility in our understanding is that it's much more about the presence of a range of factors and feelings. So noise is certainly one, but activity and movement in the landscape or in the place that you're experiencing, light, smells even, structures indeed, and then the sensations that we feel as a result of that combination of factors. We know that water is often cited as an important factor for people in how tranquil a place feels. But there's really lots of different permutations to this and lots of other overlying factors that shape that combination of factors to give an overall feeling of how tranquil a place is and people's experience of that place from the perspective of tranquility. And it does get quite complex. And even when you think about things in a a black and white way is something natural or man-made. It's certainly the case that on the whole, something that's natural would generally have a more positive tranquility impact than something that was man-made. But unfortunately, tranquil being a complex topic, it is never as simple as that. For an example, a man-made structure in the Lake District landscape is a dry stone wall. But we see that very much as something we expect to see in the landscape. The connotations we have with that are generally positive based on our understanding of the Lake District National Park and what it's all about. So a man-made structure, therefore, in that case, doesn't have a necessarily negative impact. Whereas a natural factor, maybe a particular species, a particular animal behaving in a certain way might negatively impact your experience of tranquility. So it's not as black and white as natural is always better than man-made in terms of how it affects tranquility. Permanence is another factor, so that time factor. Something could be present in the landscape, or the place that you're experiencing only momentarily. But if it really, for example, a fighter jet, a low-flying fighter jet, which is something that is experienced quite often in the Lake District, that could have a certain impact on the tranquility that you experience in a place, but it is very, very fleeting. Whereas something like litter, maybe a bit more benign in terms, certainly no sound coming from that, but if it's a regular feature on your walk, for example, that might have overall a more harmful impact on the tranquility you experience than the momentary jolt to the senses of the fighter jet. Another thing that comes into play is what you expect to see in the landscape or the place that you're experiencing. And that can change from person to person, but things like the dry stone wall, a tractor, for instance, most people would expect to see that in a rural setting, even though it's noisy, it's moving potentially, if it's ploughing a field on your walk, it wouldn't be something that would automatically affect your tranquility in a negative way because of the connotations that you associate with that and the fact that you've expected to see it in the landscape. Whereas something more natural, or in theory a natural thing, we've recently looked at a planning application for a small zoo and wildlife experience in the T-Bay Valley just inside the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and proposals to house rhinos and giraffes there. We wouldn't expect to see those in the Lake District or Yorkshire Dales National Parks. So that's another example of how something that's natural in a sense, but isn't expected or doesn't have the relevant connotations with the national park, and how that could therefore alter your the sense of tranquility and your understanding of that place. So it's very much again about connotations. So things like this picture in the bottom left there of some green algae in Windermere. We have negative connotations of water pollution. We've seen lots in the news about sewage and how that impacts on the water environment and the visual effect of that as well. And it's the connotations of that. So a lot of that comes back to individuals' understanding and expectations, people's understanding of what any environment, but the national park is about, has a real impact on how they therefore experience a place and how different things would impact on that experience. So somebody who didn't understand wouldn't realise that that's algae because it's green. Is it perhaps a plant to somebody who wasn't familiar? So their connotations would be different. And of course, it's very different. Experiencing tranquility is very different for somebody who lives in a very tranquil place compared to somebody who's perhaps visiting from a city environment. So it's very much relative and different for everyone. Because of all these different factors, it's very much not that somewhere is always very 100% tranquil or 100% untranquil, but very much a sliding scale or even a multitude of different sliding scales and quite a fluid situation depending on all those different factors and how they melt together in the pot, so to speak. Next slide, Helen, please. So tranquility matters for a lot of reasons. As I say, our members and supporters have all told us it's something that really matters to them in terms of being an important factor in the environment of the Lake District and Cumbria beyond it. but really important for our health and well-being, being able to get away from the things that stress us or that busy our minds, and to be able to access tranquility, to have that sense of calmness and to get away from the hustle and bustle, as the phrase goes. Wildlife is struggling in many places, for a whole manner of factors, but tranquility is important for species and habitats as well. They need to be able to get away from human interventions to go about the normal course of their lives for feeding, breeding, resting, and so on. Some species deal with human interaction better than others, but on the whole, tranquility is important for wildlife. And tranquility is a really important characteristic, an identified characteristic of many of the landscape types we have in the landscape of the Lake District and Cumbria beyond. So it's really important that tranquility where it exists is recognised and maintained and enhanced to ensure that that overall character is protected too. And linked to that, it's of course very much important for the feel and experience of a place and what people understand about a place as well, because that experience that you have of somewhere tells you a lot and about what that place is about and why it's special and how you respond to it's a big part of that. So tranquility influences that too. Next slide, please, Helen. So in terms of how things are currently, as I said, it's we do feel it's quite a misunderstood and overlooked topic. But insofar as it plays into specific planning applications or decisions about the management of the park, it does seem to us that quite often existing harm is used to justify further harm. So rather than saying this place has already been affected by the tranquility of this place has already been affected by a particular development or lighting, for example, rather than saying therefore we shouldn't have any more of that, we should seek to address this issue. It's often been the case that because somewhere is already less tranquil, that that's a justification for further things being allowed that would further harm the tranquility there. There's no monitoring in place or measurements in place being implemented in the national park to assess the current levels or ongoing changes to tranquility, and no specific measures in place to deliberately and actively protect tranquility as well. It's a factor to be considered amongst many, but there's nothing specific to ensure that that happens. There's a growing number of visitors and a different trends in the associated activities that go alongside that. And we often have discussions here at Friends about how the numbers and the combination of the numbers with the activities interact with each other. And we very much feel that even a greater number of visitors could potentially be accommodated in the national park if those visitors were all coming to and traveling around the park in a much more low impact way, and we're doing the activities that are more low impact rather than coming if such a majority coming in cars, and a trend for activities such as zip wire attractions and that sort of thing that we know are proposed at Elterwater that have a different type of impact than the traditional sort of walking and quiet enjoyment activities that people have come to the Lake District for many years. So those changes combined with the numbers, different trends combined with the number of visitors increasing is part of why tranquility is being eroded. We've still got some very tranquil areas, but that erosion is quite across the board, really, from different baselines in different parts of the park, of course. And then that in turn alters the visitor and resident experience of the park, and therefore what we all understand about the park and what we understand it to be. And it does worry me that it could be quite self-perpetuating, because as our understanding and experience of the park is altered, then what we expect to see and what we believe's appropriate and fits in when we get here will gradually alter as well, and that will be a cycle. Contributing factor to wildlife decline, as I linked to before, The more we allow tranquility to be eroded, the more that will have many other factors, of course, as well, but the more that will have a contributing factor to wildlife decline as well. And all of this very much brings us back to those big questions about what national parks are for. Are they about the quiet enjoyment, and should it be that we're really seeking to maintain and allowing people to continue to experience for years to come? Or is it that gradual change towards something different? And it might be that different parts of the park are appropriate for either of those scenarios, but certainly those big questions are there and need to be answered before things go too far in the wrong direction. And that then in turn links us back to the statutory national park purposes about conserving and enhancing the park, but also enabling people to genuinely enjoy what's special about the park, and the special qualities, and experiencing that, and understanding what the park's about as a result of that experience. And then that feeds into how the local plan for the park and the management plan, the World Heritage Site designation, how they should all deal with this too. Next slide, please, Helen. So what we do at the moment, we respond to individual planning applications, but also to local and national consultations on planning and other matters, planning policy, legislation, and other management plans, for example, for different aspects. So water management is one, forestry, woodlands, and so on. When we respond to those things, we almost always, where it's relevant to do so, will include an ask basically for tranquility to be better considered and better understood as part of the evidence base for those decisions and management approaches. In our day-to-day work as well, and as part of our projects, we seek to remove detractors from the landscape and to enhance the character, and that's very much linked to tranquility. So structures in the landscape, such as overhead wires. Our overhead wires officer and policy officer, Amanda McCleary, works really hard with the electricity companies to underground some of the overhead wires that detract from the landscape, as one example. But we also host things like the annual litter pick, and that also helps to enable people to get involved in a really practical way to help us enhance the character and remove detractors from the landscape. Our visitor levy campaign, we hope that a visitor levy of some kind could be used to help ameliorate some of the impacts on tranquility caused by those inappropriate visitor behaviours that we talked about before. We also work webinars such as this. We've got learning about landscapes events as well to help people increase their understanding about topics such as tranquility, and to provide opportunities for people to take that practical action as well through events and as part of our project. One of the gaps we really want to fill next is about the evidence and research around tranquility, to provide a baseline assessment of tranquility and to map it, and then to be able to monitor that in future as well. So next slide, please, Helen. We've just launched a mapping, measuring and monitoring tranquility project by issuing a tender to tender a brief for the project, so that we were asking consultants or appropriate organisations, universities potentially, to get in touch with us who are able to support us with this, initially mapping all the factors that we can map that affect tranquility, whether they're a contributor factor, so rivers, other water bodies, woodlands, access to nature, those things that contribute to tranquility, or the things that detract from it. So we'll map roads, urban areas, other sources of noise or other structures in the landscape. A lot of these are going to be tricky to map, but where we can map them, we want to do that as the baseline, as a starting point. What we then want to do is involve anyone who's interested in helping us to address these issues with protecting tranquility to get involved in our project by going out into the field, maybe on your regular walk, or places that you have camped, for example, or your favourite places in the Lake District, going out into the field with some criteria and questions, and thinking about how all these factors around tranquility are playing out in those areas and providing that data back to us to provide that qualitative layer to the quantitative mapping that we'll be doing. And then we want to reissue that on perhaps a 3 to 5 year basis so that there's a regular opportunity for people to get involved and help, but also so that we can measure that change over time and see how these different trends and how the different factors are all altering the experience of tranquility as time goes by. So it's a very complex topic, and we know it's different for different people, but it's a bit of a whistle stop tour. But we just ask you again now to think again about the words that you would use to describe tranquility, and would you choose the same words now? How would you answer the question of what tranquility is about now? And maybe think about what the factors are that you feel in the Lake District specifically are the main detractors or contributors to tranquility. It's just that thinking about what tranquility is and what it means to us and how we experience the Lake District that we really want to help people to understand and get across so that they can get more involved in this project as we go forward. Thank you.
Fantastic. So there's an opportunity now for you to ask any questions. So any of those of you who are watching us live today, you can either ask questions through the chat or through the Q&A function that you should see at the bottom of your screen. So if anybody has any questions for Lorraine, please do type those in. And whilst I'm waiting to see if there's any questions from those who are watching live, I think some questions for me, Lorraine, if that's all right. The Tranquility Mapping project sounds really interesting, and I have to agree that there's so many places in the lakes where I visited where don't appear to be as tranquil now as they were 5, 10 years ago. And how do we stop this kind of slow erosion of tranquility? But what's the timescale for your project, and when is it likely that as members of the public might get involved to help doing some of that mapping?
Yeah, we're hoping that these submissions for this tender brief that we've got out, that people are going to come back to us by the roughly the end of June with proposals for the quantitative element, so that mapping element of the things that we know already exist and are mappable and quantifiable. But the next layer onto that will be the qualitative element that we want people to get involved in. So I would say that people should, if they're interested, be looking out for more information on that from us in our newsletter, our monthly e-newsletter that goes out, and on our website and our social media, probably around late summer, early autumn. So I would think probably, let's say late August, early September, we'd be aiming to get something out about that.
Fantastic, because say it's going to continue, particularly with the conversations around kind of visitor levy, and as you say, we're heading towards that kind of busiest tourist season with all this lovely weather. It's been quite busy in the lakes already. Um, Still waiting to see if we get any more questions coming in, but one more for the moment is, I mean, if people are concerned about the loss of tranquility, in their area, whether it's inside the national park or maybe outside in the wider county, what is it, you'd suggest that they would do? Do planners have an understanding of tranquility if people are responding and saying, well, actually, it's not about, you know that is their bigger concern, is the loss of tranquility in a space from any developments.
Yeah, I mean it is a very overarching topic, isn't it? As we've explored a little bit today, and there's so many factors that contribute to it and indeed detract from it. But certainly, planners in the national park are, it is one of the special qualities that's identified as part of why the park is designated. So in that sense, they do have a responsibility to consider it in planning decisions and decisions about the overall management of the park. So there isn't really, there's not a number to call or anything if you're specifically concerned about tranquility, but you can, I would say, firstly, get involved in our project if it's something you're interested in, and you can help us that way because this evidence will feed into, it will undoubtedly enable us to have a stronger hand in asking for tranquility to be better considered in decisions, whether that's planning decisions or wider decisions about park management. But the National Park Authority and the Park Partnership are in the process at the moment of preparing a new management plan for the park. So there will be public consultations that relate to that people can respond to. So very, very important to flag up concerns about erosion of tranquility through that. Likewise, following on from that, a new local plan will be prepared in time. I don't think there's a set timescale for that yet, but it will follow the new management plan, which will be complete certainly by October of next year. That's a statutory requirement. So people will then be able to feed into that from a planning specific perspective as well. Responding to individual planning proposals, if you're concerned that they will affect tranquility, certainly respond to those and highlight that concern. And just important to remember all those different factors that can affect it. It's not just about noise, it's lighting, impacts on visual as well. Even bad smells can affect tranquility, although that's probably less something that's less able to be controlled through planning controls. But there's a few things there that people can do, certainly, yeah.
Fantastic. I'll just, oh, hang on, there might be another question so there's another question just come in. What can we do as individuals now to help preserve tranquility in our local areas?
Yeah, so those things were about responding to, bigger picture things, weren't they? The management plan and local applications or local plan policies. But from an individual basis, I think probably one of the first things that springs to mind is our Dark Skies work. We've been really encouraging people through that to think very carefully about whether they need new lighting, and when they do need new lighting, to make sure that it's dark skies friendly. And we've got lots of advice on our website, but also through our technical advice now. And there's a much shorter, more user friendly, well, we think it is quite a user friendly document, but there's a one sheet example guide to how people can ensure that the lighting is dark skies friendly. So that's one key way that individual householders and communities can think about positively affecting tranquility. But then beyond that, I suppose it's about being thoughtful about noise that's emitted from your property, or noises in the community that can be reduced. I mean, one of the issues we've experienced in recent years is telecommunications masts. And unexpectedly, they are actually quite noisy because they almost always come with a generator because they're not connected to mains electricity. So a lot of communities I know have been responding to proposals for new masts to challenge them because they think that those impacts are not outweighed by the benefits of mast. Um, so I think it is about thinking about your individual actions around lighting, noise, um, as I guess reporting things to your local council in the case of things like noise and bad smells is an option as well. And just generally raising people's awareness about what's important about tranquility and the different things that affect tranquility.
Um, Another question just coming in. How would a visitor levy help increase tranquility and address things that are undermining tranquility?
Well, our visitor levy campaign is very much about addressing the impacts of visitors and ensuring that the infrastructure is there to bridge that gap between the resources that we need to do that and what we actually have in the park, what the park has to do that. And it will depend very much on the type of levy that we end up with. There are various different options, and some research is still ongoing by the partnership, and I'm sure the local authorities will do further work as well because it would be them that would be ultimately responsible for implementing it and managing the money. But the type of levy we have will affect what it can be spent on. A vehicle charge would be almost certainly tied to transport related measures. So that has a tranquility impact because the more people we can get on public transport or using more sustainable active travel type modes of transport to get both to the park and around the park, that would naturally have a beneficial impact for tranquility just by bringing the number of vehicles down and reducing the number of car parks we needed around to accommodate those vehicles. Other types of visitor levy might be able to be spent in different ways, and the detail of that will have to be worked out by the local authorities and other partners that work in the park, including ourselves. Hopefully, we'd have some hand in that to influence those discussions. Um, but they would be a bit more open. Other bed tax, for example, other types of levy, would be able to be spent on other things. So that could include different lighting. It could potentially include better ranger services, increased ranger services to help reduce the impact of things like litter, fly camping, and those impacts on tranquility. Um, but I would probably a lot of them might well be outside the scope of visitor levy as well, actually. Things like existing roads and so on, other than reducing the number of cars, there's not a lot that a visitor levy would do to reduce some of those existing impacts. But certainly some of the things I've mentioned could be affected, yes.
That's really helpful and thinking about a visitor levy in terms of it being able to potentially provide, yeah, free public transport and incentivize people onto public transport, or if it could help, deal with some of the issues around, as we say, we're all seeing issues around littering and fly camping and those kind of things would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, and
Um,
it could help, I suppose it could help fund educational, messaging as well to help people who are perhaps new to the national park to understand um, the appropriate ways to behave when they're here and what's um that things like having a barbecue on the lake shore and then leaving said barbecue isn't the, isn't an appropriate thing to do to help the environment. So it could be around a messaging and educational thing as well that could be helped funded by a visitor levy.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I don't think there's any more questions. Let me just double check. I don't think we've got any more questions. So thank you to those who've joined us today live, and thank you also to those who I'm sure will watch back later. And we'll share the link to the webinar in our postcard, which will go out next week as well. Um, just to finally kind of wrap up from me, just a massive thanks to Lorraine for joining us today and inspiring us all to think about tranquility in different ways. Um, if you've enjoyed kind of connecting with us today, you'd like to find out more about Friends of the Lake District, please do sign up to our newsletter. You can do that on our website, and that comes out monthly, our postcard from the lakes. And equally, if you have any questions that occur to you after today, or if you're watching this back later and you'd like to ask any questions, please do email us at info@fld.org.uk. If you're interested in supporting our work, please do think about becoming a member. It's the easiest way to support, and membership costs from just £3.75 a month. And as part of that membership, you'll get copies of our regular magazine, Conserving Lakeland, as well as different member benefits. You'll also get access onto our access onto our guided walk program. You can see a bit further down there. So we have a guided walk once a month um, in different parts of the lakes, but quite often going through some of the land that we own. So that's free for members as well. Those monthly walks usually take place on a Wednesday. You can volunteer with us if you wanted to support our work. So we have volunteer work parties most weeks. And again, you can see information on our website. And there's lots of other volunteer roles. If you're not so interested in volunteering on the land, you can get involved and be an ambassador or help us in the office. So do have a look at that. And just want to flag a couple of upcoming events that are related to today's, particularly next week, we've got a learning about landscapes. Understanding Tranquility session. So this is a half-day session out with Lorraine and I think Amanda, is that all right?
Kate.
Kate. Out with Lorraine and Kate, talking more about tranquility. So that's going to be in Kendal on the Helm. Is that right, Lorraine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have still got a couple of places on that. So please do sign up. Again, that event is free for members, £5 for non-members. Um, I've mentioned our guided walk program as well. And the other event, which happens to be on the Helm, which is worth flagging as well, is our open day, which is on July the 5th. There's going to be a lot going on there. Guided walks, there's going to be events, activities for children. There's going to be an opportunity to meet the fell ponies, try your hand at volunteering, and lots more. So again, see the website for that. But thanks again for joining us. Please do think about how you can support us as we move forward and get in touch if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.